It's the show where Hawaii's newsmakers come to talk and to take your questions live. From the nation's capital to Honolulu Hale, from the state legislature to the fifth floor, we bring the experts to you and ask them what you want to know. Spotlight Hawaii with Yanji Denise and Ryan Pelesuji on the digital platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser.
Hello, and thanks for tuning in this morning. I'm Ryan Pelesuji here in Los Angeles, joined by Yanji Denise, who's back home in Honolulu. And Yanji, this morning, as many schools, or some schools, I should say, are closed because of the weather, we focus in on schools and a new initiative that's getting underway.
That's right. You'll remember from last legislative session, Act 257 was passed. That allocated $200 million to build out preschools across the state. This is something that pretty much everyone agrees on. Early access to early education is so important. So how does Hawaii get there? Well, we need the physical space, and of course, we need the teachers too. Joining us now to talk about how that money is being spent is Keone Farias. He is the executive director of the School Facilities Authority, a 6-year term appointed by Governor David Ige, and now a little less than a year underway. Tell us how it's going. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Inji. Thank you, Ryan. It's going well. It's going well. We feel so blessed that this money was allocated to the School Facilities Authority to get this expansion of pre-K underway. It's been a passion of mine. It's been a passion of my 5 board members. Obviously, it's been a huge passion for Lieutenant Governor Sylvia Luke, and so we're happy that the confidence in us is in us to go ahead and expand pre-K for Hawaii.
Let's talk a little bit about the timeline that you've been presented with, having to oversee this project and this initiative. It's an ambitious timeline, and one that has really been, spearheaded by the Lieutenant Governor, as you mentioned, someone who really wants to see this come to fruition sooner rather than later. What can you tell us about some of the timelines and some of the constraints that you're under right now because of that?
Yeah, so the timeline is really short. It's a steep hill to climb, but one worth climbing. As you know, the Executive Office of Early Learning has been doing this work for longer than 10 years. And up until this point, we have around 37 public pre-K classroom in 10 years. What we're trying to do here in a short timeline by August 2024 is to expand to 50, perhaps 55 more public pre-K classrooms. So it's really steep. We have been tasked by Lieutenant Governor. She has helped tremendously in getting our agency partners together, EOEL, Executive Office of Early Learning, School Facilities Authority, Department of Education, and our charter schools to get us in shape and to challenge us to open 11 classrooms by August 2023, 1 year ahead of time, 1 year ahead of schedule, and below budget.
That's amazing. Can you tell us, what are some of the challenges when it comes to finding the sites for these preschools, and are the needs of the actual classroom different than you'd see in, say, an elementary or a high school facility? Tell us about, are you looking at, modular, or are you looking at renovating existing space? Sort of what will these classrooms look like, and where will they be?
Right. So let's start with the need. The studies have been going on, like I said, for the last 30 years, but at least in the last 10 years, a huge spotlight on where these deserts are located, where there's the greatest need for pre-K classrooms, where families don't have access. So the data's there. That's not the challenge. The challenge is finding those seats, right? If the need is in area A, that school has a need in not just pre-K, but in kinder 1st through 12, right? So finding the existing seats or the available spaces so we can do renovations. Renovations are proven to be a cheaper way to get a quality product out there. It's already folded into the existing campus, so there's safety protocols and ADA access and parking and such. And it also in the area where parents drop off their 6 and 7-year-olds as well, right? So it's where our families are traditionally going. In terms of other challenges, finding the workforce obviously will be a challenge. Designing classrooms that are different in K-12. Our existing teacher contracts have sizes of classrooms, 27 to 1 for 3 to 12 and closer to 20 to 1 for K1 and 2. So we're designing these classrooms specifically for 3 and 4-year-olds with appropriate desk heights, with appropriate bathroom facilities and toilet and wash basin heights, where the bathrooms need to be in the line of sight of teachers. So just little things like that add up to costs. It add up to the extension of the timeline. But it's a great challenge to have. We're designing spaces for our littlest of ones, like trike spaces, and where they can ride their bikes and where they can access play, and how do you incorporate outdoor play with the indoor classroom. So it's been a really, really fun project to now. I would say those challenges is what makes this so worthwhile.
I mean, when you talk about some of those things, those are things that you don't even think about, right? Like the bathrooms and the different types of adjustments that need to be made for these younger students, essentially, that are coming in, vastly different than, those who may be in elementary school. So that's very interesting to note. When we're talking about some of these changes that need to be made, obviously it comes at a price tag, and you have a budget that you have to kind of adhere to. How confident are you that you, have enough budget to make sure to make some of these changes that are required? And presented with a timeline that you're speaking about earlier, how confident are you that you're going to be able to spend down the money that has been allocated by the legislature thus far?
Yeah, so that's two different questions, right? We're very confident that the money's being appropriated for this timeline is enough money to get the classrooms we need, right? 11 classrooms by August 2023, 55 classrooms by August 2024, and up to 80 or 100 classrooms by August of 2025, right? So we need to spend down this money in a thoughtful way, getting the 11 classrooms out. And like I said, we are on track to be under budget, what we thought a classroom would cost. Will we continue to be under budget when we look at new classroom builds on new sites or independent pre-K facilities? We're not certain yet. We're in the architecture and engineering stages there. But one of the main challenges will be, we know who our partners are on the DOE campus. That's Executive Office of Early Learning. We know that the Charter and the Charter School Commission will be our partners on the charter campuses. Who will be our partners going forward when we build independent pre-K facilities that we've seen on the continent? But I must say, we've seen very, very few of them. There are not a whole bunch of states that are doing a great job in addressing pre-K needs. So that will be an issue. And who will be our operators? And to this point, it was super exciting that a lot of people came to the table early. When they see the constraints based on statute or based on our current constitution, people have backed away thinking, well, we can't be the operator of that facility. And we're hoping that's not the case. We're hoping we have courageous conversations around who can help us partner and fill these seats. And the second part of your question, will this be enough? This is just stage one. When Lieutenant Governor was House Chair, she made it very clear that this is just the first appropriations of money to tackle as many as 200 classrooms, looking at 4,000 seats. We know currently that we have upwards of 10,000, closer to 20,000 seats of need, where there's proven need where 3 and 4-year-olds are not accessing any type of formal education, receiving that sort of training, if you will, that growing up, those developmental stages from parents or from grandparents or from aunties and uncles. So we're confident we have enough money for this first tranche. We're also confident that we're going to do it in such a way that there'll be interest from the public for us to keep expanding until we hit all of those seats.
You spoke about having partners, and I'm interested also in just your staff. I know that you went before the legislature at the beginning of the year to ask for more support, because it is a big task to build these classrooms, to find the sites, to engage with partners. You're only one person. I know you have, I believe, a staff of 3. I can't fathom having to do this with those kinds of resources. Where are you, in terms of staffing? Do you have enough manpower really to do this right now?
Yeah, so that's a very, very nice question. Thank you for that. It gives me the opportunity to really thank the people that have helped us stand up. First, the vision of our board chair, Alan Oshima, working with some key senators like WAM Chair De La Cruz and Education Chair Kidani. They've worked really hard to stand us up and give us authority. Currently, it's myself. I started in June of last year and didn't receive a list for my first hire until September of 2022. But I will say our small staff of 3, myself as the director, Scott Fuji as our administrative services officer, he knows the ins and outs of the ledge, has been tremendously helpful. And then Cindy Waterita is our business management officer. So, I mean, it is an all-star group. Those two have worked really hard. But my board has been really, really helpful in filling the gaps. And then there's been private partners out there, HCF, with Micah Kane stepping up and offering support and help. With Terry George has been huge with us, and all the other agency partners have all sort of filled in the gaps. Right now, we're out to contract with project managers, construction managers, architects and engineers. So we're using both public and private support to get this done. We will grow by one staff member in the coming weeks to serve as our project manager, since we have these projects out there now. We are hoping to grow by 3 more when this ledge closes. And if appropriations go the way we want it, we'll have 5 more positions. So we could be a total of 12 staff by, say, September of next year. And that won't just be on the Act 257 projects, but some of the other projects assigned to the School Facilities Authority.
Yeah, I mean, it's just pretty incredible when you think about the small group that you have, but the large undertaking that you have in front of you speaks a lot, obviously, to the work that you folks are doing right now. And in speaking about, the staff, there's also, as you touch upon, some of the teachers and making sure that these classrooms are adequately filled. With the teacher shortage that we see currently with the entire DOE system, how are you recruiting teachers specifically for these types of roles? And do you feel that you'll be able to find the necessary support and personnel to man these classrooms once they're stood up?
Yeah, so there is a teacher shortage in Hawaii and nationally. We're not hoping. We know we will staff up. Will we staff up for this 11 classrooms in 2023? Yes. We know the numbers are out there. We have some leads. The DOE has been very helpful. I must say, over on the facility sides, Kurt Otoguro and Randy Tanaka, managing all the operations within the DOE and helping the SFA become a complementary strategy for them has been tremendous. Now, on the OTM side, Executive Office of Early Learning, Yuko Arikawa, has been working with them. I've been working with Nathan Murata over at University of Hawaii, working with Chaminade. So we're confident we'll grow to the numbers we need. Still worried about getting to 55 for next year. Was happy to see front page of all of our newspapers, Governor and Superintendent Hayashi, Osatui from HST announcing a decent sized raise for our teachers. We know we need to offer them a lot more to be competitive. But coming out of this legislative session, we're hoping to get some care, if you will, around workforce housing and things of that nature that make it more attractive to teach in Hawaii. So it is a major concern. We have to keep our foot on the pedal, if you will, on that gas pedal moving forward. But we're confident with the right messaging, with the facilities that our keiki deserve, that we can attract and retain these teachers.
Yeah, let's talk about some of those other measures moving their way through the legislature. Bill 941, I believe, is the one that you're referencing. For people who have not been tracking what's happening at the Ledge, tell us a little bit about that bill and how workforce housing can really work hand in glove with the initiatives that you're pushing right now.
Right. So Senate Bill 941, currently still alive and in crossover, made its way over into the House. It's still intact. This was introduced by Senator Kidani, obviously the Senate Education Chair, who wants to see this happen, who knows that we can increase teacher pay, but we've got to find the housing to attract teachers here. These are Senate Bill 941 talks about 3 pilot projects, over in Nanakuli, in Waipahu, and in Mililani. And so these are very centrally located, strategically located, where we believe in working with HSTA and with the Senate is where teachers want to live, where it makes it easier for them to avoid traffic and get to the schools of highest need. We also recognize the SFA and the SFA board that's just this will take one chunk out of that workforce housing, that we have workforce housing issues on Lanai and Hana, especially out in areas like Naalehu and Ka'u, in various places around the state, definitely on Maui, with just the cost of living. So we're hoping these pilot projects will prove that we can enter into private and public partnerships and knock out a bunch of housing for our workforce.
And if you can explain a little more, should this bill pass and it eventually becomes approved by both houses and passes through the legislative session, what would the next steps be? How quickly could this be stood up? And how will the teachers who get to utilize this new service and this new perk be selected?
Yeah, great. So we haven't gotten right to the selection process, but we know this won't be decided by the SFA. This will be heavily determined by cooperation with HSTA and the Department of Education. And they've started these conversations. We talked to Ann Mahi and also over at HSTA. We currently have a study, a survey being created to send to our teachers so we know where they want to live in and what type of accommodations. Do our teachers fresh out of college want 1 bedrooms, or are they okay with having a roommate and sharing 2-bedroom units like they did in college? So this survey will be very important in determining what type of builds we will do. There will be, again, collaboration with HSTA when we start talking about selection, and if we set this at 70 or 80% AMI, etc. But we will cross that bridge when we get to it. Our first step is selecting the sites, and the Senate has done work with all 3 principals on those campuses already. There is definitely a want, a desire, and a cooperation from those principals to place these units on or near these school sites.
It's such an interesting thing. We've heard about that for years, underutilized DOE lands that could be, build a low rise, let's say, and have the school, their cafeteria on one level and have teacher housing above. Is that the kind of thing you're envisioning here?
So these 3 projects won't have the housing integrated into the actual facilities for these campuses. We have a lot, we need to try this out first. Obviously, we need a lot of consideration around safety and how do we keep these facilities apart from the students' activity and access. But I will say that on at least one of these sites, we will try to incorporate the pre-K facilities with these workforce housing so that these teachers, these workers, these EAs and cafeteria workers and custodians can leave their kids in the morning in the facility they live in, go to work and come back to that. So currently we wouldn't be incorporating it into the existing campus, but we will be looking at putting in some pre-K classrooms on the ground floor of these facilities.
Yeah, we know that it's difficult to predict as things change, even up into the final moments during the legislative session and crossover and conferencing, I should say. But what is the appetite right now for senators and lawmakers for this to pass? Have you had conversations with some of the key individuals and leadership, and do you think that there is broad support to see this through?
Yeah, there's definitely, we've had conversations on both the House and Senate side. We've met with very key individuals. The appetite is there. People want to see this. We want our workers here. Hawaii attracts people. It's a nice place. And a recent conversation with one of my board members, Lindsay Ball, said it was easy to get to South Dakota and attract teachers, right? They sign up, they want to come, and right before school starts, they write to me and say, I can't get there. There's no housing. I can't find any place to live, or the numbers just don't work out. So we know there's an appetite, and our lawmakers know this. They've heard it for years and years. This is a good year because there seems to be some room in the budget and some monies, but with inflation, with the cost of materials going up, everybody's aware that this won't be the case going forward. And there is, at least in the last week, seemed to be some desire to tighten up this budget and be very frugal and responsible to the people of Hawaii. Still, I think overall, we're hearing that there's support to get a couple pilot projects done and just take a bite out of it. We have agency partners like HPHA and HHFDC saying we all need to do this work. We all need to take a piece of this responsibility, if you will, and they're welcoming the SFA and DOE to this partnership.
I want to bring in a question from the audience here. You did talk about that momentum of going ahead of schedule with those 11 classrooms opening in August. Beyond that, and let's include some of that too, how did you choose those sites? And Grant Phillips wants to know, what areas currently have the highest need for pre-K classrooms? You're responsible for the entire state. Where are you focusing, those 11, and then beyond, where is the next phase going to be?
Yeah, great. Good question. So we didn't focus on just 11. 11 wasn't a number that we targeted. EOEL, prior to Act 257, had a process on how they select sites. And they selected 23 sites using their criteria. So we started with those first 23. We also surveyed the entire state to see where there was a desire, where there was a want. And we used the want against the list that was created by the Center on Children from the University of Hawaii. And that's how we cross-reference to make sure that there was a need, one, and then there was also a desire to do it. We did not want to waste precious time in an area where there wasn't need, or where there was need and it would be too hard to effectuate that project or to get the want there. So from the 23, we distilled it down to 11. I don't like the word lowest hanging fruit, but they were truly the lowest hanging fruit. They were the easiest to access campus prior to the ending of this school year. We're going to do this work when kids are out on May 1st and get this ready in the teachers' hands around July 2025 for the opening of school on August 1. Super, super steep. So it required a lot of cooperation and coordination. And these 11 were the first that we could realistically get done. There are probably a couple more that could have snuck their way in there, and they're in our second phase. We're not stopping at 11. We're in current negotiations up to 80 new sites. Knowing that EOEL has asked for the operating budget of 55, that has become our tranche number 2, so to speak, but we're still focusing on all 80 sites. And that's how they were selected.
And do you find those more in rural communities and urban communities? Like where do you expect, not necessarily 11, but that larger list, where are you focusing that on? Because obviously we can't build them all, so you have to prioritize. So where do you see the need?
Right. So yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't answer the second part of that question. So they're both rural and urban. We decided to learn. We have strategy partners alongside of us. So in choosing these, we tried to select a broad range where we could come up with a pre-K building strategy for Hawaii. We've never had one. And so we chose projects on all the major islands so that we would have that data, especially in selecting contractors under our pre-qualified small contractor vehicle. And so we use many, many factors in that. But the highest areas of need, it would surprise you. You'd think Hana, because there's not many options, but there's few people there. You think Mauna Loa and Kauai, small, there's a need for 8 maybe in Mauna Loa. We want to build classrooms where we can fill all 20 seats, but what happens to that 8 in Molokai? Sorry. So we've done a balance of all of the above, but there's a need area in every area. You look at Kihei. Kihei seems pretty urban, pretty close to central Maui and the rest of Maui, but it's comes up as an area of highest need because of the amount of people that live there and the little access granted to it, where preschools are running upwards of $2,000 a month per child.
One of the things that was brought up when we spoke to the Lieutenant Governor last was this concept of not necessarily developing these preschools where people live, but more where they work, because of the fact that they would have to drive home or following the end of school, rather than having to go back to their communities back home, it would be based around more urban areas. If you can expand a little bit more about this process and this thought process on this, and is this something that will sort of shape the way in which you folks determine these future sites?
Yeah, that's another good point. So we've been saying this for years, and I'm glad Lieutenant Governor has emphasized this. There's schools in Hawaii by constitution, by statute, are populated based on geography. There's a process for geography exception, but for the most part, it's one geographic area, you're assigned to school A, another geographic area assigned to school B. For pre-K, because there's so little, our parents, well, for K-12, our parents want their kids in school where they work. We see it here on Hawaii Island all the time, where our Puna residents want a GE to the Hilo schools because that's where the jobs are, or in Kona, much of the same. So we've explored that. It's harder to get that data because the data we receive is from the DOE. So if we know if school A has 100 kindergarteners, 5-year-olds, we know that area has the need for 100 4-year-olds, etc. So this has made it a little more challenging. Yet we've been designing around very central areas where we know there's high workforce. I know the hotel associations in Waikiki have asked SFA to look for pre-K opportunities there in Waikiki. Very expensive to acquire the land and the buildings, but we know there's a high workforce there. We know by looking at Seagull schools in central Oahu, they have 200, 300 seats of kids essentially located right in the middle of this urban core. So we've been employing those models, trying to keep it facilities open where students are currently, because parents feel much better about leaving their 3 and 4-year-old where they have their 7 and 8-year-old. So we know we need those classrooms, but we also know we need these classrooms where our families are working.
I want to remind people that, before you were in this job, you were a complex area superintendent. And before that, you were a teacher in the classroom. Tell us a little bit, everyone sort of agrees that early childhood education is a top priority, but having been an educator, can you tell us the difference that you see in children who have had this access versus those who have not?
Yeah, great question. And thank you for that. I started my journey here to this place as a teacher. I will return to be a teacher one day as the greatest job. It is the greatest job in the world. It brings the greatest amount of joy. So as a principal, so I didn't really take much notice into this, right? Some kids are haves and some you consider have-nots. They had a great upbringing by the way they behave in school, their mannerisms, if they were reading by third grade, etc. It's when I became principal at Keone Elementary that I started to notice very clearly. You walk into a first grade class, 90% of the time you can hit it on the head. That kid had pre-K or that kid didn't. And if you got it wrong, where that kid had pre-K and teacher goes, no, they didn't, they had amazing parents. They had the opportunity for mom to stay at home, where their dad had a job well enough to pay for the entire household and mom could focus on that child. So that's not the case here in Hawaii. Both parents need to work. They need to work 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet. And so pre-K is the only way these kids will get, have that ability to start reading in kindergarten, or have that kindergarten readiness. I knew as principal, we couldn't get them caught up by third grade if they didn't have those foundational 3 and 4 year old years. We couldn't get them caught up by 5th grade in some cases. And it cost us a ton of money. I'm telling you, the state put so much money in Title I schools like Keone Elementary, where just to get our kids caught up. And so this is, I think, a very, very good investment in terms of we cut down those secondary and tertiary supports while they're in kinder to 5th grade. It's better than break-even deal.
We are almost out of time, but I wanted to provide you an opportunity for just a final thought. This is a big undertaking, and this is a lot of responsibility that falls on your shoulders. You're having to go to the legislature and report back to them, ask for money, while simultaneously planning ahead, not only for the timeline that's been presented for this coming school year, but beyond. Just your final thoughts about this journey that you're embarking on and this initiative overall that you've been tasked to manage.
Yeah, well, so I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the confidence of our legislature. I'm grateful for the confidence of Governor Green, who has given us the green light. So if we're all in, we're going all in. And so School Facilities Authority remains committed to Act 257. It's just one part of our mission. We're fully committed to helping the DOE, helping Hawaii in our workforce housing shortage to make sure our teachers have places to live where they can save up to buy a home and stay here in Hawaii. We also know the responsibility on the School Facilities Authority is in building all CIP projects for the DOE, in taking on building of new schools, the schools that we believe our keiki deserve and that our families want. And then finally, we also know it's part of our mission to look at, as Yinji said, our underutilized facilities and how do we repurpose those facilities for multi-generational use, or in some point for even commercial use, so we can start finding a funding stream other than taxpayers to keep education going, to provide quality education here in Hawaii. So thank you for the opportunity to share.
School Facilities Authority Executive Director Chad Keone Farias, thank you so much for being with us this morning and giving us all those updates. When the ledge is POW and we know how everything shakes out, we'd love to have you on again to talk about the next steps.
I'll be back. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Aloha.
Wow, Ryan, amazing to hear the responsibility that he's been given under Act 257, $200 million to spend in just about 2 years from now, and a staff of 3 people managing all of that. He did go to the legislature in January to ask for more support staff because that is just so much for that small group to take on. It sounds like he will be getting a little bit more of that, but really they are tasked with quite a lot. And he did say that the lieutenant governor has been a great partner with him. This is something that the governor has tasked her really with helping to oversee. Those 11 preschools opening in August, that is or classrooms, that's wonderful news for those communities. And I think we're all excited to see what happens next.
Yeah, I'm just interested to hear the process and really that condensed timeline when you think about it in terms of how much days really it comes down to that they have to set all of this up, recognizing that school will end in May and that they're looking at July to potentially allow teachers into those facilities and get these classrooms up and running, while also taking into account some of the accommodations that need to be made on a facility standpoint, from bathrooms. And you heard him, just the line of sight between the classroom and the bathrooms, the teacher to student ratio as well, something that also is a significant impact on the number of teachers that are needed. So there are a lot of logistical concerns, and there's a lot of logistical matters that need to all be ironed out within this condensed timeline to ensure that they are able to meet this expedited, really this target that they've set for themselves. But you heard from him as well that they are expected to be under budget, which many lawmakers would be happy to hear as well.
That's right. And it's probably a good argument as they try to get more funding through that Bill 941 that he talked about, Senator Kidani's bill, that would expand housing, pilot projects on 3 sites that could create workforce housing, perhaps for educators or school administrators, other staff, to try to, alleviate some of that burden, because the facilities are one thing, the staff is quite another. And we know the DOE faces big challenges there with staffing current classrooms. And so how will they be able to staff all these preschools? Well, we're going to have to look at housing as a big component of that. So we'll be tracking that bill as well. You really hear the passion from him in all of that. He started out this journey, he said, as an educator, and then as becoming a principal. He said you can really see the difference between children who have had that early access and unfortunately those who have not. And he really argues that it's not just about taking care of the kids, that this is really a good financial investment for the DOE as a whole to prevent having to do all that remediation and support on the other side. Why not help them early on?
Yeah, and just really incredible when you think about the scope and everything that needs to go into place to get this stood up. And like you said, the passion by him and his fellow coworkers. There's 3 of them right now that are working tirelessly to ensure that this is all going to come to fruition, and that they are confident that they will find the teachers, that they will be able to do this, but recognize that there are some challenges ahead. And also noting that where these classrooms will actually be located is something that they are also taking into account by taking surveys and determining what areas of need are needed the most when it comes to urban areas versus maybe some of the more rural spots where there may not be the population that is needed, but also there's no lack of need there as well. So a lot of things to decipher through and to have to figure out. And so no doubt they have their hands full moving into this next phase of what the future of pre-K looks like for the state of Hawaii.
Yeah, we'll definitely have him on again soon to talk about what's next and how those classroom openings are going. On Friday, we are going to be speaking with Kathy Betts. She's the head of the State Department of Human Services, that agency, of course, with taking care of so many in our community. She was confirmed and she's made it through. So we're going to be talking to her about what's next for that department. She's been working there for a number of years as a deputy. Now she takes the helm. What are her initiatives there? We'll be catching up with her on Friday at 10:30, and we do hope to see you then.
Take care. Aloha.